The Shadow of Deception, Chapter 1. The first crack Ethan. Reynolds had always trusted his wife, Lauren. Their marriage of 8 years was built on laughter, late-night conversations, and unwavering loyalty, or so he believed. That was until he caught the way she smiled at someone else. It was a small thing, a fleeting moment at a party, but it burrowed into his mind like a parasite. The man was her colleague, Daniel Cross. A charming executive with an easy grin and an aura of confidence Ethan had never liked. When Ethan confronted Lauren about it that night, she laughed it off. "Ethan, are you seriously jealous?" she said, rolling her eyes. "Daniel's just a friend. You're imagining things." But Ethan wasn't imagining the way her fingers lingered on her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. He wasn't imagining the way her late nights at work had increased, or how she suddenly had a password on her phone. Chapter 2. The Investigation. Begin's suspicion gnawed at him. Ethan wasn't the type to pry, but the seed of doubt had been planted. He needed answers. He reached out to an old friend, Jake Holloway, a private investigator. Over beers at a dimly lit bar, Ethan laid everything out. "I don't have proof," he admitted. "Just a feeling," Jake smirked. "That's how these things start, man. A gut feeling. And 9 times out of 10, the gut is right." Over the next week, Jake dug into Lauren's activities. Ethan's heart pounded every time his phone rang. When Jake finally called, his voice was laced with something Ethan couldn't quite place. Pity. "She's been meeting him," Jake said. "Hotels. Twice this week." The words hit Ethan like a sledgehammer. He felt the world tilt, his stomach clench. The evidence was undeniable. Photos, timestamps, receipts. Chapter 3. The confrontation Ethan waited in their living room that night, gripping a glass of whiskey with white-knuckled fingers. When Lauren walked in, looking exhausted but satisfied, he spoke in a voice that wasn't his own. "Where were you?" She hesitated. "Work ran late." His laugh was bitter. "Try again." Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, fear. He tossed the photos on the table, watching as her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came. "Say something," he demanded. Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, don't. Just don't." Her betrayal was laid bare. Every whispered excuse, every late-night meeting, it was all true. She tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. Something inside him shattered. Irreparable. Chapter 4. The twist. The pain was unbearable. Ethan felt dizzy, like the world was unraveling before his eyes. He staggered back, the room spinning, and then he woke up. The sound of his own gasp echoed in the bedroom. His heart hammered in his chest. He turned to see Lauren sleeping peacefully beside him, oblivious. A dream. It had all been a dream. Relief flooded him, followed immediately by unease. It had felt too real, too vivid. He ran a hand over his face, trying to shake the feeling. But then, his phone buzzed. He reached for it with shaking hands, unlocking it to see a message from Jake. "Holloway, we need to talk. It's about Lauren." Ethan's blood ran cold. Maybe it had been a dream, or maybe it was a warning. Chapter 5. A warning or a curse. Ethan sat up in bed, his breath still uneven from the vivid dream. His fingers hovered over his phone, rereading Jake's message. "We need to talk. It's about Lauren." A sickening déjà vu washed over him. The exact words, the same ominous feeling, just like in the dream. He turned to look at Lauren. She was still asleep, curled on her side, her dark hair spilling over the pillow. He studied her, searching for something, anything, that would tell him the dream wasn't real. But doubt gnawed at him. He couldn't ignore this. Slipping out of bed carefully, Ethan grabbed his phone and padded to the bathroom, closing the door behind him. He dialed Jake's number, his pulse racing. Jake answered on the second ring. "Ethan, you're up." The way he said it sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "What's going on, Jake?" A pause. Then Jake exhaled sharply. "I don't want to do this over the phone. Meet me at Carter's Diner in an hour. Come alone." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Is this about—" He hesitated. "Is it about what I think it is?" Jake's silence was answer enough. Chapter 6. The first clue, Carter's Diner, was the kind of place that never slept, its neon sign flickering over rain-slick pavement. Ethan spotted Jake immediately, seated in a back booth, nursing a black coffee. His face was tense, his usual cocky smirk absent. Ethan slid into the booth. "Tell me." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table. "I wasn't going to tell you yet, not until I was sure. But after what I found tonight, I couldn't wait." Ethan's hands were clammy as he opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough. Lauren, standing in a parking lot, not alone. Daniel Cross was with her. Ethan's stomach twisted. The setting was dark, but the body language between them was unmistakable. Lauren's hand was on Daniel's chest. His hand cupped her waist. In another, they were speaking closely. Too closely. "She told me she was at work," Ethan muttered, his fingers tightening around the pictures. Jake watched him carefully. "I followed her tonight. She met him at the Lexington Hotel. She was there for over an hour?" Ethan forced himself to breathe. This was exactly like his dream. The same suspicions, the same betrayal. "This isn't proof of an affair," Ethan said hoarsely. "They could be talking about work." Jake sighed. "Ethan, open your eyes. You saw it coming. Maybe you saw it before you even wanted to believe it. Your gut was right. Hell, maybe even your subconscious was screaming at you in your sleep." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. The dream, was it really just a dream? Or had it been something more? A premonition? A warning? One thing was clear now. He had to find out the truth. And if Lauren was lying to him, he wouldn't be the one caught off guard again. Chapter 7. The game begins. Ethan didn't go home that night. Instead, he sat in his car outside the diner, gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly at the city lights. Betrayal. The word pulsed in his mind like a beating drum. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the gaslighting, the way she had smiled at him every morning while sneaking off to another man. But she had underestimated him. If she thought she could get away with it, she was wrong. His phone buzzed. A message from Jake. "You want more proof, or are you ready to play offense?" Ethan exhaled sharply. The old version of him, the trusting husband, would have hesitated. But that Ethan was dead. Let's play. Chapter 8. The first strike Ethan started small. If Lauren wanted to lie to him, he'd let her. He played the role of the oblivious husband while quietly setting his trap. First, he planted a tracking app on her phone. Nothing too obvious. Just a subtle background process she wouldn't notice. Every time she left the house, he knew exactly where she was going. Second, he reached out to a divorce attorney. He needed to be smart. If he moved too soon, she could manipulate the situation. No, he needed a plan that would leave her with nothing. Finally, he began setting financial traps. They had joint accounts, shared investments, but Ethan started shifting funds, rerouting assets, making sure that when the time came, Lauren would be left grasping at air. Jake, ever the professional, continued tailing her. And the more Ethan learned, the colder he became. She wasn't just cheating, she was planning something. Chapter 9. The betrayal runs deeper. One evening, Jake called. His tone was different, sharper. "Ethan, you need to see this for yourself. Come to 4th and Holloway, room 612. Ethan didn't ask questions. He drove. The Lexington Hotel again. He knew it before he even saw the name. He stepped out of his car, heart pounding. The hotel's lobby smelled of polished floors and expensive deceit. He took the elevator to the 6th floor, where Jake waited by the door, arms crossed. "You sure you want to see this?" Jake asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Open it." Jake picked the lock with ease. The door clicked open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the air thick with betrayal. Lauren's voice drifted from the bathroom, low and teasing. "I told you, he doesn't suspect a thing." Ethan didn't move. He heard the sound of a man's laugh. Daniel's voice. His hands curled into fists. Jake put a hand on his shoulder. "You want to handle this now? Or do you want to destroy them properly?" Ethan forced himself to breathe. A part of him wanted to kick the door in, to scream, to break everything in sight. But that would be too easy. He smiled coldly. "No, I want to take everything from her." Chapter 10. The setup Ethan got to work. He secretly gathered every piece of evidence he could. He made copies of bank statements, emails, and texts. With Jake's help, he even recorded a conversation where Lauren admitted to siphoning money from their shared accounts, money she had been funneling into a private account. She wasn't just cheating, she was preparing to leave him. She was planning to take everything. But now, the tables had turned. Ethan prepared his counterattack carefully. He transferred her stolen money into a separate account under his control. He alerted his lawyer, ensuring that when she filed for divorce, because she would, she'd find herself financially ruined. And then he set the final trap, a message sent from an unknown number to Daniel. "She's playing you. She's still sleeping with her husband. Meet at room 612 tonight if you want proof." Ethan leaned back, smirking. Let them destroy each other. Chapter 11. The Fall. That night, Ethan watched from the shadows. Lauren arrived first, stepping into the hotel room with the confidence of a woman who thought she was in control. Daniel arrived minutes later, his face dark with suspicion. "You're still with him, aren't you?" he accused, his voice sharp. Lauren blinked. "What?" "No, that's ridiculous." Daniel threw a folder onto the bed. "Then explain these." Lauren's face paled as she flipped through the photos. Pictures of her entering and leaving their house at suspicious hours, texts subtly manipulated to suggest she had been playing both men. Ethan had made sure Daniel saw exactly what he wanted him to see. "You were going to leave me with nothing," Ethan's voice cut through the room. He stepped inside, his presence making Lauren freeze. Her eyes widened. "Ethan, wait." "I trusted you." His voice was quiet, but lethal. "And you planned to ruin me?" Daniel turned to her, face twisted in fury. "You told me he was nothing, that he was weak." Lauren tried to speak, but Daniel lunged at her in rage. The room exploded in chaos. Ethan watched it all, satisfied. By the time the police arrived, called anonymously by Ethan himself, Lauren and Daniel were in the middle of a screaming match, with enough financial fraud evidence planted in the room to implicate both of them. Epilogue. Shadows of the past Ethan sat at the corner table of a quiet bar, nursing a glass of bourbon. The warmth of the liquor did little to silence the echoes of the past. It had been 3 months since Lauren's fall. Her betrayal had cost her everything. Her finances drained, her reputation shattered, and her relationship with Daniel obliterated in a storm of mutual destruction. The scandal had gone public. Lauren had tried to fight back, spinning lies to save herself. But Ethan had been meticulous. Every shred of evidence he had collected had buried her deeper. Now, she was alone. Daniel had turned on her to save his own skin, testifying against her in a legal battle over embezzlement charges. And Ethan, he walked away untouched, a ghost in the night. The bar door swung open, and Ethan's sharp instincts immediately picked up on a familiar presence. Lauren. She was different now. Gone was the confident, manipulative woman he once knew. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes no longer designer perfect, and her eyes, once full of cunning, held something else now. Desperation. She approached him cautiously, her voice soft. "Ethan," he didn't respond. He simply took another sip of his drink, letting the silence stretch. Lauren sighed, sliding into the seat across from him. "I lost everything," Ethan smirked. "You should have thought of that before you tried to destroy me." She looked down, fingers tracing the rim of a water glass. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I didn't see what I had until it was gone." Ethan exhaled sharply. "And what exactly do you want, Lauren? Forgiveness? A second chance?" He leaned forward, eyes cold. "Because neither of those are on the table." She swallowed hard, pain flashing across her face. I just wanted you to know that I regret everything." Ethan studied her for a moment. He had dreamed of this, of seeing her broken, desperate, and yet, as he watched her now, he felt nothing. No rage, no satisfaction, just indifference. That was the real victory. "I'm sure you do," he said finally, standing up. He tossed a few bills onto the table and met her gaze one last time. "Goodbye, Lauren." He walked out, never looking back. Outside, the night air was crisp, fresh. The past was finally behind him, and the future, his alone to shape. The end. Epilogue. The final move. Ethan walked down the dimly lit street, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting from his shoulders. He had won. Lauren was nothing more than a fading scar in his life, but scars had a way of aching when you least expected them. A cold gust of wind cut through his jacket as he reached his car. The city felt eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. He pulled out his keys, about to unlock the door. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Ethan turned, expecting to see some drunk stumbling out of a bar. But it was Lauren. Her face was pale under the streetlight. But her eyes burned with something dark, something unhinged. "You can't just walk away," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I already did." She stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold air. "You took everything from me." "No, Lauren," he said evenly. "You did that to yourself." For a moment, she just stared at him, as if searching for a crack in his resolve. Then her lips curled into a strange, almost wistful smile. "I loved you once, you know." Ethan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "No, you loved control. You loved winning. And when you realized you couldn't manipulate me anymore, you tried to destroy me instead." Her fingers twitched at her side. "And yet, here you are, still talking to me." "I won't make that mistake again." Ethan opened the car door, ready to drive away for good. But Lauren's next words stopped him cold. "I'm pregnant." The silence between them was deafening. Ethan turned slowly, narrowing his eyes. "What?" She gave a sad, almost bitter chuckle. "You heard me." His mind raced. Could it be true? Was this another manipulation? If she was telling the truth, whose child was it? Daniel's? Someone else's? His? Lauren stepped forward, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "You wanted..." "Revenge, Ethan! You got it! But now what?" Ethan clenched his fists, his entire world tilting on its axis. Was this her final card? A desperate move to sink her claws into him one last time? Or was this the one thing he never saw coming? To be. Continued? Epilogue. Blood ties or lies? Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. Pregnant? He studied Lauren's face under the dim streetlight, searching for any sign of deception. But she was always good at this, at manipulating truth and fiction until they blurred together. His voice came out low, controlled. "And I'm supposed to believe it's mine?" Lauren smirked. "You tell me. We were still together before everything fell apart, weren't we?" His jaw clenched. Yes. They had still been intimate in the months leading up to the discovery of her betrayal. But so had she and Daniel. And who knew how many others? He exhaled sharply. "Paternity test." Lauren crossed her arms. "Fine. But what happens? If it is yours?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He wasn't about to let her dictate the terms of this conversation. He needed to think, to strategize. If this was another one of her games, he would expose it. If it was true, he wasn't sure what that meant yet. Lauren took a step closer, her voice softening. "I don't expect anything from you, Ethan. I just thought you should know." He almost laughed, as if Lauren had ever done anything without an angle. But instead of engaging, he simply nodded. "You'll hear from me." Then he turned, got into his car, and drove away, leaving her standing alone in the cold night. The investigation begins. Ethan didn't sleep that night. By morning, he was already making calls. First to his lawyer, then to Jake. Jake picked up on the first ring. "What's up?" "I need you to find out everything about Lauren's last few months. Every person she's been in contact with, any medical visits, anything suspicious." Jake let out a low whistle. "That bad, huh?" Ethan rubbed his temple. "She says she's pregnant." A pause. Then Jake sighed. "And you don't know if it's yours?" "Exactly." There was a rustling sound on the other end. "I'll dig. But Ethan, be careful. If she's lying, she's setting up something big. And if she's telling the truth," Ethan's grip tightened on the phone, "then I'll handle it, unraveling the truth." 3 days later, Jake called back. "You're going to want to sit down for this." Ethan leaned against his desk, bracing himself. "Tell me." Jake exhaled. "Lauren did visit a doctor last month. She's really pregnant." Ethan's stomach twisted, but he kept his voice steady. "And the father?" Jake hesitated. "That's where it gets interesting. She hasn't listed one." Ethan frowned. "Meaning? She could be hiding it for legal reasons, or she doesn't know." A muscle in Ethan's jaw twitched. "So, it could be mine or it could be Daniel's." "Or someone else's," Jake added. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. This was exactly what he had expected. Lauren using uncertainty as a weapon. "She's going to use this against me," he murmured. "No doubt." Ethan took a slow breath. He had destroyed Lauren's life, left her with nothing. But now, she had a new card to play, and he had a decision to make. Would he walk away? Or would he face the possibility that, despite everything, his blood might be tied to hers forever? To be continued. Would you like to explore Ethan's next move, whether he fights for the truth or Lauren's final gambit, or do you want to add another twist? The DNA trap. Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his apartment, staring at his own reflection. Lauren's final move had shaken him, but not broken him. Not yet. A child. Was it his? Or was this another one of her desperate attempts to tether herself to his life? There was only one way to find out. He grabbed his phone and called Lauren. She answered after 2 rings. "I wasn't expecting you to call so soon," she said, voice laced with something between amusement and challenge. "We're doing a paternity test," Ethan said bluntly. A pause. Then, "Fine. But if it's yours, what then?" Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "First, let's see if that's even a question." Lauren let out a soft, breathy laugh. "Always so cold, Ethan. It's what I loved and hated about you." He ignored her bait. "I'll send you the details. Be ready." Before she could respond, he hung up. Jake's warning later that night, Ethan met Jake at a secluded diner on the outskirts of town. They sat in a booth near the back, away from prying ears. Jake leaned forward. "I did more digging." Ethan sipped his coffee, waiting. Jake exhaled. Lauren's been meeting with someone. A lawyer. Ethan's jaw tightened. What kind of lawyer? Jake slid a file across the table. One who specializes in high-conflict custody battles and, get this, fraud cases. Ethan flipped open the folder, scanning the information. His stomach twisted. Lauren wasn't just playing the pregnancy card. She was preparing for war. Jake tapped a finger on the table. If she's got a lawyer lined up before even confirming the father, it means she's setting something up. My guess? She's hoping the kid is yours so she can drag you through hell. Ethan's mind raced. If the child was his, she could use it as leverage, child support, public image destruction, legal warfare. If the child wasn't his, she might still try to falsify results to trap him. He needed a strategy. The paternity test, or the setup. 2 days later, Ethan and Lauren met at a private clinic. She arrived looking composed, wearing a soft blue dress, her hair pulled back neatly. But Ethan wasn't fooled. This was her game face. As they waited for the doctor, she turned to him with a small, knowing smile. Nervous? Ethan didn't blink. No, she chuckled. You always were hard to shake. The nurse called them in. A simple cheek swab, a few signatures, and it was done. Results would be back in a few days. Lauren turned to him as they left the clinic. If it's yours, will you do the right thing? Ethan looked her dead in the eyes. The right thing? You wouldn't know what that was if it slapped you in the face. Her expression flickered. Hurt? No. Just another mask. See you soon, Ethan, she said softly before walking away. Ethan exhaled. Something about this didn't sit right. And he was about to find out why. The double cross. The night before the results were due, Jake called again. You're not gonna like this, Ethan tensed. Tell me. Jake's voice was grave. Lauren visited another clinic a week ago. Different. Name. Different doctor. Guess what for? Ethan's blood ran cold. A paternity test? Bingo. But here's the kicker. She tampered with the results. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Meaning? She already has a fake test proving you're the father. Ethan's vision darkened at the edges. She was trying to frame him. She was betting on the idea that he'd accept the results at face value, that he'd be too caught off guard to investigate further, but she had underestimated him. Again. Ethan took a slow breath, his mind sharpening. If she wanted to play dirty, then so would he. But this time, he'd make sure she never recovered from it. The final play. The next day, Ethan walked into the clinic with quiet confidence. Lauren was already there, sitting gracefully in the waiting area. She greeted him with a soft smile. Are you ready? Ethan smirked. More than you know. The doctor handed them the envelope. Lauren's fingers twitched slightly as she took it. She opened it slowly, dragging out the moment. Then, she looked up, her eyes gleaming with victory. Congratulations, Ethan. You're going to be a father. Silence stretched between them. Ethan simply nodded. Good. Lauren tilted her head, surprised. That's it? No reaction? Ethan leaned forward, his voice cold. Because I already know you faked it. Lauren's face froze. Ethan pulled out a second envelope from his jacket and tossed it onto the table. Here's the real result. Lauren's breath hitched. Slowly, hesitantly, she opened it. Her face drained of color. The truth was right there, in black and white. The child wasn't his. Ethan's voice was calm, lethal. Nice try, Lauren. She swallowed, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know how this happened. Cut the act, Ethan interrupted. You set this up. You were going to use a fake test to trap me. But you got sloppy. Lauren's lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. She had lost. Again. Ethan stood up, smoothing his jacket. This was your last shot, Lauren. And you missed. The ghost of Lauren Ethan was free. Or so he thought. 2 weeks had passed since he exposed Lauren's fake paternity test, since he walked away and left her in the wreckage of her own schemes. He should have felt lighter, relieved. But something gnawed at him. Lauren had taken the loss too easily, and that wasn't like her. Jake had warned him. She's setting something up. But what? The missing piece one evening, Ethan received an encrypted message on his phone. Unknown number. You should check again. Attached was a file, a hospital record. Ethan opened it. His stomach tightened. The document showed that Lauren had been admitted to the emergency room a week ago. The reason? A miscarriage. His fingers curled around the phone. What the hell? Lauren was never pregnant? Or had she actually been carrying a child only to lose it? And if so, whose was it? Jake's discovery. Ethan called Jake immediately. Tell me you've got eyes on Lauren, he demanded. Jake sighed. That's why I was about to call you. She's disappeared. Ethan stiffened. What do you mean disappeared? Jake hesitated. She's gone. Vanished. No credit card use. No known addresses. She cleaned out a private account and went dark. Ethan's mind raced. Lauren never just left, not without a reason. What are you thinking? Jake asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't know yet, but I don't like it. A message from the past that night. Ethan found an envelope slipped under his apartment door. No postage, no name, just a handwritten note inside. You thought it was over. It's not. His blood ran cold. At the bottom of the note, a time and an address were written. Tomorrow night. 11 p.m. The Sycamore Motel. Ethan exhaled slowly. Lauren wasn't done, and now he had to decide. Walk away for good or step back into the fire. To be continued. The trap at Sycamore Motel. Ethan sat in his car, parked a block away from the Sycamore Motel. It was the kind of place where people checked in but didn't always check out. A neon vacancy sign flickered overhead, buzzing in the cold night air. His instincts screamed trap. Lauren was many things, manipulative, deceitful, relentless, but she wasn't careless. If she wanted him here, it wasn't for closure. Jake had offered backup, but Ethan told him to hold off. If this was a setup, he needed to see who else was involved. He checked his gun, made sure the safety was off, then stepped out. The room of Lie's room 106. The door was slightly ajar. Ethan pushed it open cautiously, gun drawn. Inside, the air was thick with cheap perfume and cigarette smoke. A single lamp flickered beside the bed, casting long shadows. And then he saw her. Lauren sat on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, sipping from a glass of wine like they were just two ex-lovers meeting for a drink. You came, she murmured, swirling the wine in her glass. Ethan didn't lower his gun. Cut the theatrics, Lauren. Why am I here? She exhaled slowly, setting the glass down. Because you don't know the full story. Ethan scoffed. I know enough. You faked a pregnancy to trap me. Then you disappeared when it didn't work. Lauren smiled faintly. You're half right. Ethan took a slow step closer. Start talking. Lauren's gaze darkened. I didn't fake the pregnancy, Ethan, but the baby wasn't yours. His grip tightened on the gun. I already figured that out, she nodded. But what you don't know is who the father was. She let that hang in the air, watching his reaction. Ethan kept his face unreadable. I don't care. Lauren chuckled. Liar. Ethan clenched his jaw. Who? She leaned forward slightly. Richard. The name hit him like a gunshot. Richard. His own brother. The same brother who had always resented him. The same brother who had a habit of smiling a little too much around Lauren. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. You're lying, Lauren smirked. Am I? Ethan took a sharp breath. If that's true, why tell me now? Lauren's expression shifted. Something flickered behind her eyes. Fear. Because Richard isn't the only one who wanted to hurt you, she whispered. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Before she could answer, the lamp shattered. A gunshot ripped through the room. Ethan dove to the side, rolling behind a dresser as another bullet tore through the wall. Lauren let out a sharp scream, clutching her shoulder. Blood bloomed across her dress. Someone was trying to silence her, and they weren't done yet. The unseen enemy, Ethan, pulled his gun and fired 2 shots toward the open window, but the attacker was already gone. He rushed to Lauren's side. Who the hell did you piss off this time? Lauren coughed, wincing. It's not just me. It's you, too. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about her lies anymore. Someone else was pulling the strings, and they had just sent a warning to be continued.